What if everything you've been taught about prayer is wrong? What if the most common, heartfelt practice of your faith is actually based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how reality works? And what if, because of that misunderstanding, you've been locked out of the very power that the ancient texts promise is yours to wield? This isn't about changing your beliefs. This is about uncovering a method, a technology of consciousness that was demonstrated clearly 2,000 years ago, then systematically forgotten by the institution that was supposed to preserve it. What you're about to hear is not a new doctrine. It is a lost key. A key to a door that's been standing inside you all along. If you stay with me, I will guide you through the historical blind spots, the mistranslated words, and the hidden patterns in Scripture that point to a practice so profound, it can transform your experience of reality from one of hoping and waiting to one of knowing and witnessing. This is not for the casually curious. This is for those who have felt the hollow echo of unanswered prayers and sensed, deep down, that there must be more. The secret starts not with what you say to God, but with where you go when you close your eyes. Imagine the scene outside the tomb of Lazarus. The stench of death is physical, a wall of despair. Mary is weeping. The disciples are confused, hiding their doubt. And Jesus stands in silence. He doesn't join the mourning. He doesn't look worried. He lifts his eyes. And he says words that, if you truly hear them, should shatter every conventional notion of prayer. He says, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me." Past tense. He gives thanks for an answer before the miracle manifests. Before Lazarus stirs, before the grave clothes unwind, before the gasp of air fills decayed lungs, Jesus is speaking from a reality where it is already done. This is the first colossal clue. This is not prayer as request. This is prayer as recognition. This is the language of someone who isn't speaking across a distance to a separate deity, but someone who is speaking from a place of such profound unity with the source of all things that for them, the future and the present have collapsed into a single finished fact. But the question that has haunted scholars and seekers for centuries is, how? What interior journey did he take to arrive at that unshakable certainty? What was the inner shift, the mental and spiritual alchemy that preceded the outward wonder? The Gospels are frustratingly silent on the mechanics. They show us the before and the after, but the critical transition, the hidden method, happens in the space between verses, in the unrecorded silence. Or so it seems. Because if we pull back, if we stop reading the stories as isolated events and start seeing them as a sequence of evidence left for us to decode, a pattern emerges so consistent, it becomes impossible to ignore. And this pattern points directly to a set of instructions Jesus gave that are so plain, so explicit, that we've read them 1,000 times and never seen them for what they are, a precise manual for accessing the state from which miracles flow. Let's trace the pattern, a trail of breadcrumbs left in plain sight. Before feeding the 5,000, he looks up to heaven. A simple gesture, but loaded. He's not looking for something. He's aligning with something. Before walking on water, he goes up the mountain, alone, to pray. Withdrawal, solitude. Before healing the paralytic lowered through the roof, the text says he saw their faith. But between seeing and speaking the command to walk, there is a gap, a pregnant pause where something internal must have occurred. Before any major act of power, the sequence repeats. Withdrawal from the crowd, solitude, an interior shift, then power. It's a spiritual law, as reliable as gravity. But the most stunning clue, the one that hands us the map, is found not in a dramatic miracle story, but in the Sermon on the Mount. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus is instructing his followers on how to pray. And he says this, "But when you pray, go into your inner room, close your door, and pray to your Father who is in secret." For 2 millennia, this has been taught as a lesson in humility and privacy. Find a quiet closet. Don't pray showily in public. And while that's a valid surface reading, it completely misses the explosive, technical meaning beneath the Greek words. The word translated as room is tamion. It does not mean a physical closet or a bedroom. In ancient Greek, a tamion was an inner chamber, a storeroom, a treasury, the most secure, hidden, interior part of a house where you kept your most valued possessions. Jesus isn't giving real estate advice. He is giving a coordinate within your own consciousness. He is saying, when you pray, the first movement is not with your mouth. It is with your awareness. You must journey inward, beyond the surface noise of your thoughts, beyond the identity you call me, beyond the endless chatter of wants and fears. You must go into the inner chamber of your being, the treasury of your true self. And then, he says, close the door. This is the critical, active step most prayer completely skips. Don't just try to focus. Don't just minimize distractions. Actively seal the door. Shut out the entire world of the senses, the sights, the sounds, the mental traumas, the version of you that is a collection of problems begging for solutions. Why? Because of the reason he gives next. Pray to your Father who is in secret. The Father is not out there, listening from a distant throne. The Father is in secret. He is within the inner room itself. The destination of the journey and the presence you seek are the same place. You are not traveling to reach God. You are traveling to the place where God already is, and always has been, waiting for your recognition. Now, hold this map in your mind, the map to the tamion, the inner room, and look again at the pattern of Jesus' life. Every time he withdraws to a lonely place, to a mountainside, to the wilderness, he is physically enacting this inner spiritual command. He is going into the inner room of creation, closing the door on the demands of the crowd and positioning his awareness in the secret place where the Father dwells. He is performing the method. And from that place of seamless union, what flows out is not a plea, but a power. A power that calms storms, multiplies food, and rebuilds decayed flesh. But here is the haunting, historical tragedy that explains why your own prayer life may feel so different, so disconnected. This method, this precise technology of entering the inner room and closing the door, was gradually, systematically lost. Not in a grand conspiracy, but through a slow, bureaucratic erosion. As Christianity moved from the catacombs to the cathedrals, from small, intense communities of practice to a vast, governing empire, something had to give. And what gave was the subtle, the interior, the ungovernable. You can systematize liturgy. You can standardize doctrine. You can teach masses of people to recite the same words. But you cannot systematize silence. You cannot force a mystical internal awakening on a timeline or a spreadsheet. You cannot train a parish priest to guide people into a state of divine union if he himself has never been taught how to enter it. So, the brilliant, dangerous, transformative method faded into the background. The words of Jesus remained in the Bible, but the practical understanding of how to go into your inner room became the guarded secret of mystics, monks, and desert hermits whispered in monasteries, while the mainstream church focused on the rituals that could be controlled. The map was left in the book, but we forgot how to read it. We kept the request, but lost the reception. So, we arrive at the core revelation, the pivot point upon which everything turns. Prayer, in the way Jesus practiced it, is not about persuasion. It is not about convincing a reluctant God to change his mind. It is about coherence. Let that word sink in. Coherence. In physics, coherent light waves are aligned, in phase, moving together as one. They carry tremendous power like a laser. Incoherent waves are scattered, out of sync, and their power is diffused. Your normal state of consciousness, with its worries, its separate sense of self, its endless petitions, is incoherent with the frequency of source. It's like a radio broadcasting static on the wrong frequency. The miracle of Jesus was not that he tuned in to God's frequency. It is that he achieved such perfect coherence with it, that there was no longer a distinction between the broadcaster and the signal. He and the Father were one single, coherent emission of will. And from that place of perfect alignment, he didn't need to ask for the storm to cease. His very presence, speaking from that coherence, was the calming of the storm, because the storm itself was a lower, incoherent frequency that could not sustain itself in the field of his alignment. This is why he could thank the Father before Lazarus emerged. From within the inner room, in that state of perfect coherence, the miracle was already a finished fact in the causal realm of spirit. All that remained was for the slower, denser physical reality to catch up to what had already been established in the unseen. His prayer of thanksgiving was simply the acknowledgement of that fact. He was speaking from the end result. This changes everything. It means the purpose of spiritual practice is not to get better at asking, but to get better at aligning. To dissolve the internal static, the noise of the separate self, until you are a clear, coherent vessel through which the Father's will, which is always for life, for wholeness, for healing, can flow unobstructed. But how do we, with our busy, modern minds, achieve this coherence? How do we find this inner room and close the door? The initial step is deceptively simple, yet it is the foundation upon which the entire structure rests. You must learn to be still, not just physically, but mentally. You must stop the prayer of the lips and the petition of the mind. Tonight or tomorrow morning, I want you to try this. Don't kneel and start talking. Sit, close your eyes, and just breathe. Feel the air moving in. Feel it moving out. And with each exhale, consciously release one layer of the noise. Let go of the thought about the work email. Let go of the memory of the argument. Let go of the anxiety about the future. Let go of the very idea of you who needs things. Don't fight the thoughts. Just gently, persistently, return your attention to the breath, to the sensation of being alive in this moment. You are not trying to achieve a special state. You are letting go of all the states that are not it. And as you do this, you will begin to sense a background hum of silence behind the chatter. A presence that is not a thought, not an image, but a feeling of profound depth and stillness within you. This is the threshold. This is the door to the Tamian. And when you feel it, your entire job is to not rush forward. Don't start asking for things. Don't start reciting scripture. Just be there. Stay in that stillness. Even if it feels like nothing is happening, you are doing the most important work of your spiritual life. You are closing the door. You are telling the world of noise, not now. I am within. You are learning the geography of your own soul. And this is where the journey truly begins, because once you can find this doorway, even for a few fleeting seconds, you can return. And each time you return, the path becomes clearer, the stillness becomes deeper, the coherence becomes stronger. What happens next, after you've learned to find the stillness and close the door, is where the mystery deepens into pure wonder. This is not the end of prayer. It is the beginning of a new kind of communication, one that very few ever experience. Once you are established in the inner room, once the door is sealed against the chaos of the outer world, a fascinating inversion takes place. You are no longer in the room with God. You begin to understand that you are the room where God resides. The distinction between seeker and sought, between petitioner and source, begins to dissolve. This is the secret meaning behind Jesus' words in John 14:10. The words that I say to you, I do. Not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. He is not a separate entity receiving orders. He is a location, a dwelling place. The Father dwells in him, and from that indwelling, works are done. The prayer that then arises from this state is not you speaking to God. It is God's own will, God's own creative intention, sounding through you as a word, a knowing, a silent command. This is the authority, the exousia, that astonished the crowds. It wasn't the authority of ego, of a powerful personality demanding results. It was the quiet, undeniable authority of a natural law speaking itself into manifestation. When a seed sprouts, it doesn't ask the soil to help. It operates from the coherent authority of its own inherent nature, aligned with the law of growth. From the place of union, you operate with the same kind of authority. Your word for healing is not a hope. It is a recognition of the wholeness that already exists in the spiritual reality, and your spoken agreement with it pulls that reality into the visible realm. But to access this, you must pass through a phase of training that the ancient mystics called the purification of the faculties. Your imagination, your will, your intellect, all must be recalibrated in the silence. Your imagination, which usually runs wild with fears and fantasies, must learn to rest, to become a passive receiver rather than an active creator. Your will, which is used to striving and forcing, must learn the paradox of surrendered action that arises spontaneously from alignment, not from personal desire. And your intellect, which wants to analyze, label, and understand God, must finally become quiet, admitting that the presence in the inner room is known by acquaintance, not by description. This process isn't always blissful. It can feel like a death, because it is the death of the illusion of a separate, controlling self. The Desert Fathers called it the gift of tears. It's the profound release that comes when you finally stop holding up the exhausting facade of being the author of your own life, and you collapse in relief into the awareness that you are being lived by a wisdom infinitely greater than your own. And this brings us to the most thrilling, the most awe-inspiring implication of all. If this method of Jesus entering the inner room, achieving coherence, operating from union is the true engine of miraculous manifestation, then the stories of the saints, the mystics, even the misunderstood wonders of other traditions begin to shine with a new, unifying light. We start to see a common thread running through human history, a golden braid of those who discovered this inner door. Think of Moses before the burning bush. He turns aside from his ordinary path to see the great sight. God calls to him from within the flame. And what is the first command? Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. The removal of the sandals is the ancient symbol of shedding the outer, worldly identity, the protections of the ego. It is the act of closing the door to the profane. Only then, standing bare and receptive on the holy ground of his own awakened consciousness, can he hear the mission and receive the power to fulfill it. The bush was not supernatural because fire was rare in the desert. It was supernatural because it burned without being consumed, a perfect symbol for the divine presence that inhabits the inner room, a fire of pure being that burns at the core of creation without destroying the vessel that contains it. Or consider the prophet Elijah on Mount Horeb. He is fleeing for his life, his mind a whirlwind of fear and failure. He witnesses a great wind, an earthquake, and a fire, all symbols of powerful, external, dramatic forces. But the scripture says, the Lord was not in the wind, not in the earthquake, not in the fire. After the fire, there came a still, small voice, a gentle whisper. The Hebrew phrase is even more evocative. Kol demama daka, the sound of sheer silence. Elijah wraps his face in his mantle and stands at the entrance of the cave. He has to shut out the spectacular to perceive the subtle. He has to enter the inner stillness to hear the voice of guidance that gives him his next instructions. This is the same pattern. Withdrawal from the chaos, entering the silence, the cave, the inner room, closing the door, the mantle over his face, and then receiving coherent instruction from the secret place. The method is eternal. Now let's journey further into a realm that connects this spiritual coherence to the very fabric of the cosmos itself. Modern quantum physics, in its own stumbling mathematical language, is brushing up against the edges of this ancient mystery. The double-slit experiment famously suggests that at a fundamental level, particles exist in a state of potentiality, a wave of possibilities, until they are observed. The act of observation of measurement, of conscious attention collapses the wave function into a single, definite particle. Think about that in light of the Lazarus story. Jesus, from his state of divine coherence in the inner room, holds a single, unwavering observation. Lazarus is whole and alive in God. He is not hoping for a future possibility. He is fixing his awareness, his observation, on the finished spiritual reality with such intensity that it collapses the wave function of sickness and death in the physical realm, forcing it to align with the observed truth of life. His thanksgiving prayer was the announcement of that collapse. This is not to reduce God to a quantum mechanic, but to suggest that the laws of spirit and the laws of the deepest reality we can scientifically probe may be converging on the same principle. Consciousness is fundamental and creative. Your scattered, incoherent consciousness observes a world of lack, limitation, and separation, and that is the reality that manifests for you. The Christ level of coherent consciousness observes only the Father's perfect will wholeness, abundance, life, and that reality is compelled to manifest around it. This is the true faith that moves mountains. It's not blind belief. It is the sustained, coherent observation from the inner room, an observation so unified with Source that it carries the creative power of Source within it. When Jesus said, "If you have faith like a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move,' and it will move," he wasn't speaking of a quantitative amount of belief. A mustard seed is small, but it is coherent. It is a perfect, whole, complete package of life in potential. It is not divided against itself. It doesn't partly believe it as a tree and partly believe it as a rock. It is singular in its purpose and nature. That kind of faith, undivided, coherent, whole, is an unstoppable creative force because it is in perfect alignment with the creative principle of the universe itself. But to wield this coherence, you must first become intimately familiar with its opposite, the incoherence that lives within you, which the ancient texts often call the adversary or the accuser. This isn't a red figure with a pitchfork. It is the inner voice of separation. It is the mental chatter that says, "You are alone. God is far away. You are not enough. You must strive, fear, and protect." Its primary strategy is to keep you identifying with the noise outside the inner room, to convince you that the noise is all there is, and that the quiet secret place within is either non-existent or too dangerous to enter. Its most brilliant tactic is to co-opt your spiritual practice itself. It will turn your prayer into a frantic list of requests, reinforcing the story of your lack. It will turn your scripture study into an intellectual exercise, reinforcing the illusion that God is an object to be analyzed. It will even turn your desire for miracles into a form of spiritual greed, reinforcing the ego's desire for specialness. To walk the path of the inner room, you must learn to recognize this adversary not as a monster to fight, but as a distraction to gently, patiently disregard. Every time you sit in silence and a thought arises, "This is a waste of time. I should be doing something useful. What if God is angry?" That is the adversary knocking at the door. And your practice is to simply not answer. You don't argue with the thought. You don't engage it. You acknowledge its presence and gently return your attention to the breath, to the stillness, to the feeling of the presence in the secret place. You are teaching your own consciousness where home truly is. This is the spiritual warfare of the new covenant. It is not fought with swords and shouts, but with silence and unwavering attention. The battle is for the ground of your own awareness. And each moment you spend in the inner room, with the door closed, is a victory in that war, reclaiming territory for the kingdom of heaven within you. As you reclaim this territory, something else begins to happen in your outer life, a phenomenon the old masters called synchronicity. You think of a friend you haven't spoken to in years, and they call you moments later. You have a sudden, clear intuition to take a different route to work, only to later discover there was a major accident on your usual path. A book falls off a shelf in front of you, open to a page that contains the exact answer to a problem you've been wrestling with. These are not coincidences. They are the outer ripples of your inner coherence. When you are aligned in the inner room, you are like a radio tower broadcasting and receiving on a clear frequency. You begin to operate in harmony with the hidden currents of divine providence. Life stops feeling like a series of random collisions and starts feeling like a guided, though often mysterious, narrative. You are no longer rowing against the current of the universe. You have turned your boat to align with it, and unseen currents begin to carry you. This is the practical, daily fruit of the practice. It is the daily bread Jesus taught us to ask for, not just physical sustenance, but the flow of coherent grace that meets each moment's need. And from this place of sustained synchronicity, as your inner coherence solidifies, you may begin to feel a new kind of impulse. Not the ego's desire to do something great, but a quiet, compelling nudge from within the secret place. It might be to speak a single word of comfort to a stranger. It might be to create a piece of art, write a letter, or start a project whose full purpose you cannot yet see. This is the beginning of praying as the Father. This is your will, now so purified and aligned, becoming a conduit for the Father's will to express itself in the world in a unique way through you. You are not copying Jesus' miracles. You are allowing the same principle that worked through him to work through you in the form meant for your life. Your miracle may not be walking on water. It may be the miracle of forgiveness, where there was only bitterness. It may be the miracle of peace in the midst of financial chaos. It may be the miracle of a healing presence that calms a room without you saying a word. These are the quiet, world-changing miracles that flow from a soul anchored in the inner room. And so, as we near the end of this initial exploration, though truly, we are only just beginning to scratch the surface, I want to leave you with a challenge and an invitation. The challenge is this: for the next 40 days, commit to this practice as your primary form of prayer. Let your petitions and intercessions be brief, if you do them at all. Instead, devote your time to the silent journey inward. Sit, breathe, release, feel for the stillness, close the door. Don't seek dramatic experiences. Seek the deepening of the silence. Keep a simple journal. Note not what you thought or saw, but the subtle shifts in your outer life, the synchronicities, the moments of unexpected peace, the sudden insights. Watch as the coherence you cultivate within begins to gently, inevitably, reorder the world around you. And the invitation is this: if what you've heard today has sparked a recognition within you, if it has illuminated a path you feel compelled to walk, then join me. This is not a journey we are meant to make alone. The early church called itself the Way. It was a path of practice, of transformation. By clicking that like button, you're sending a signal not just to the algorithm, but to the universe that you are a seeker of this deeper truth. By subscribing, you are choosing to walk this path with me as we continue to peel back the layers of this profound mystery in videos to come. And by leaving a comment below with just one word, the name of someone you are holding in the light of the inner room, or single word of gratitude from your own silent practice, you are creating a web of coherent intention. You are amplifying this signal into the world. You are becoming part of a community, not of doctrine, but of practice. Not of belief alone, but of direct experience. Together, we can remind a hungry world of the lost method, of the open door within. We can be the quiet ones who, by dwelling in the secret place, become the leaven that quietly lifts the entire loaf. The adventure is just beginning. The next layer we will uncover delves into the secret symbology of the Gospel of John, how the 7 I am statements are not just declarations, but precise frequencies of consciousness doorways into specific aspects of the Father's nature within you. And beyond that, we will explore the terrifying and glorious process the mystics called the dark night of the soul, not as a punishment, but as the final necessary furnace, where the last vestiges of the separate self are burned away leaving only the pure gold of unified will. But for now, your mission is clear. Your map is in your hands. Go, be still, enter the inner room, close the door, and discover what who has been waiting for you in the secret place all along. Now, let us turn our gaze from the quiet intimacy of the inner room to a landscape shrouded in cosmic shadows and celestial betrayal. For the path of power Jesus walked did not exist in a vacuum of light. It was a narrow bridge stretched taut over a roaring abyss of opposing forces that did not merely exist in the outer world of Romans and Pharisees, but within the very fabric of perception itself. What you are about to discover is the hidden war that underpins every miracle, the silent struggle that makes coherence not just a practice, but a monumental victory. The next part of this revelation will shatter your passive understanding of the gospel story, because we are going to decode the true nature of the wilderness temptation, and you will see it was not 3 isolated tests, but a masterclass in dismantling the entire artificial reality that holds humanity captive. This is where the story turns from beautiful theory into a desperate, thrilling manual for survival. Imagine the sheer, visceral shock of it. Jesus, brimming with the potent awareness of the Father's voice at his baptism, "You are my beloved Son," is immediately driven by the Spirit, not into a ministry of glory, but into the heart of a desolate wasteland. This is the first critical clue we miss. The Spirit leads him into confrontation. The inner room, it seems, has a lethal threshold. 40 days and nights, no food. The primal ache of hunger becomes a grinding, physical mantra. And in this state of radical vulnerability, when the body's cries are deafening, the presence arrives. We call it the devil, the tempter, Satan. But to label it as a mere cartoon villain is to miss the terrifying sophistication of its strategy. It does not appear with horns and a pitchfork. It arrives as a voice within the landscape of his own depleted consciousness, using the very logic of the world. Its opening salvo is not about sin, but about identity. If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become bread. Do you hear the lethal elegance? It does not deny his sonship. It uses it. It accepts the title Son of God, but seeks to redefine its meaning. It proposes a path of coherence, but a corrupted one using the power of the inner union, not from a place of surrendered trust in the Father as provision, but from a place of personal lack and urgent, self-directed need. You have the power. Use it to satisfy your own hunger. Prove your identity to yourself by manipulating matter for your personal benefit. This is the foundational lie of the artificial reality, that your spiritual authority is a tool for the fortification and comfort of the separate self. Jesus' rebuttal is a sword thrust into the heart of this lie. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. He is declaring that true sustenance, true life, doesn't come from manipulating outer forms, even with spiritual power. It comes from a state of receptive abiding, of hearing and being nourished by the coherent flow of the Father's will in the present moment. He refuses to use the inner room authority to serve the ego's agenda. The first fortress of the adversary crumbles. But the assault does not end. It evolves. The next stage is even more psychologically profound, and it reveals a secret about the nature of the world you think is solid and real. The tempter takes him to the pinnacle of the temple, the very center of religious and societal power, and says, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you." Here, the attack shifts from physical need to spiritual spectacle in the temptation of guaranteed safety. It is a temptation to force the hand of divine coherence, to demand a miraculous public rescue that would prove his special status beyond all doubt. It is the lure of the showy miracle, the sign and wonder performed not from organic need, but as a performance to cement worldly or religious authority. It is prayer as spectacle, coherence as theater. This is the trap of seeking the evidence of power instead of abiding in the source of power. Jesus' response cuts the cord. You shall not put the Lord your God to the test. To test God is to operate from a place of distrust, to say, "Prove you are with me by meeting my conditions." It is the exact opposite of the past tense thanksgiving at Lazarus' tomb. One is a demand for evidence before belief. The other is a declaration of trust that evidence will follow. He refuses to corrupt the relationship into a transaction of proof. Then comes the final, breathtaking offer, and it is here that the true scale of the war is unveiled. Showing him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time, the tempter makes its ultimate claim. "To you I will give all this authority and their glory, for it has been delivered to me, and I give it to whom I will. If you, then, will worship me, it will all be yours." This is the colossal revelation. The tempter claims ownership and operational authority over the systems of the world, its governments, its economies, its social hierarchies, its glittering prizes. And Jesus does not dispute the claim. He does not say, "That's not yours to give." He accepts the premise and rejects the trade. "You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." This moment changes everything. It means the world, as a system of organized separation, competition, fear, and egoic ambition, is a managed construct, a kingdom with a ruler, and it operates on a frequency of consciousness that is inherently incoherent with the kingdom of the inner room. The wilderness temptation was not about avoiding 3 random sins. It was a systematic inoculation against the 3 core perversions of spiritual power, using it for self-gratification, using it for self-aggrandizement, in achieving worldly ends by aligning with worldly systems of authority. Jesus walked out of that desert, having rejected the entire operating system of the adversary's reality. His coherence was now incorruptible. But this leads us to a disturbing and vital question for you. If the world as systems are built on this handed-over authority, where does that leave your daily life? Your job? Your finances? Your social interactions? The answer is not to flee to a mountaintop, but to understand you are now a covert operative of a different kingdom, living behind enemy lines, and your mission is one of subtle, transformative reclamation. And the tool for this reclamation is a form of prayer so focused, so laser-like, that the mystics called it the arrow prayer, but its true purpose is far more radical than mere piety. Imagine the sheer, visceral shock of it. Jesus, brimming with the potent awareness of the Father's voice at his baptism, "You are my beloved Son," is immediately driven by the Spirit, not into a ministry of glory, but into the heart of a desolate wasteland. This is the first critical clue we miss. The Spirit leads him into confrontation. The inner room, it seems, has a lethal threshold. 40 days and nights, no food. The primal ache of hunger becomes a grinding, physical mantra. And in this state of radical vulnerability, when the body's cries are deafening, the presence arrives. We call it the devil, the tempter, Satan. But to label it as a mere cartoon villain is to miss the terrifying sophistication of its strategy. It does not appear with horns and a pitchfork. It arrives as a voice within the landscape of his own depleted consciousness, using the very logic of the world. Its opening salvo is not about sin, but about identity. "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become bread." Do you hear the lethal elegance? It does not deny his sonship. It uses it. It accepts the title Son of God, but seeks to redefine its meaning. It proposes a path of coherence, but a corrupted one using the power of the inner union, not from a place of surrendered trust in the Father as provision, but from a place of personal lack and urgent, self-directed need. You have the power. Use it to satisfy your own hunger. Prove your identity to yourself by manipulating matter for your personal benefit. This is the foundational lie of the artificial reality, that your spiritual authority is a tool for the fortification and comfort of the separate self. Jesus' rebuttal is a sword thrust into the heart of this lie. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. He is declaring that true sustenance, true life, doesn't come from manipulating outer forms, even with spiritual power. It comes from a state of receptive abiding, of hearing and being nourished by the coherent flow of the Father's will in the present moment. He refuses to use the inner room authority to serve the ego's agenda. The first fortress of the adversary crumbles. But the assault does not end. It evolves. The next stage is even more psychologically profound, and it reveals a secret about the nature of the world you think is solid and real. The tempter takes him to the pinnacle of the temple, the very center of religious and societal power, and says, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you." Here, the attack shifts from physical need to spiritual spectacle in the temptation of guaranteed safety. It is a temptation to force the hand of divine coherence, to demand a miraculous public rescue that would prove his special status beyond all doubt. It is the lure of the showy miracle, the sign and wonder performed not from organic need, but as a performance to cement worldly or religious authority. It is prayer as spectacle, coherence as theater. This is the trap of seeking the evidence of power instead of abiding in the source of power. Jesus' response cuts the cord. You shall not put the Lord your God to the test. To test God is to operate from a place of distrust, to say, prove you are with me by meeting my conditions. It is the exact opposite of the past tense thanksgiving at Lazarus' tomb. One is a demand for evidence before belief. The other is a declaration of trust that evidence will follow. He refuses to corrupt the relationship into a transaction of proof. Then comes the final, breathtaking offer, and it is here that the true scale of the war is unveiled. Showing him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time, the tempter makes its ultimate claim. To you I will give all this authority and their glory, for it has been delivered to me, and I give it to whom I will. If you, then, will worship me, it will all be yours. This is the colossal revelation. The tempter claims ownership and operational authority over the systems of the world, its governments, its economies, its social hierarchies, its glittering prizes. And Jesus does not dispute the claim. He does not say, that's not yours to give. He accepts the premise and rejects the trade. You shall worship the Lord your God, and Him only shall you serve. This moment changes everything. It means the world, as a system of organized separation, competition, fear, and egoic ambition, is a managed construct, a kingdom with a ruler, and it operates on a frequency of consciousness that is inherently incoherent with the kingdom of the inner room. The wilderness temptation was not about avoiding 3 random sins. It was a systematic inoculation against the 3 core perversions of spiritual power, using it for self-gratification, using it for self-aggrandizement, and achieving worldly ends by aligning with worldly systems of authority. Jesus walked out of that desert, having rejected the entire operating system of the adversary's reality. His coherence was now incorruptible. But this leads us to a disturbing and vital question for you. If the world as systems are built on this handed-over authority, where does that leave your daily life? Your job? Your finances? Your social interactions? The answer is not to flee to a mountaintop, but to understand you are now a covert operative of a different kingdom, living behind enemy lines, and your mission is one of subtle, transformative reclamation. And the tool for this reclamation is a form of prayer so focused, so laser-like, that the mystics called it the arrow prayer, but its true purpose is far more radical than mere piety. This understanding of the 2 kingdoms, the kingdom of God within and the managed system of the world without, casts every one of Jesus' subsequent actions in a new, electrifying light. His miracles were not just acts of compassion. They were acts of insurgency. They were targeted incursions of the coherent reality of the inner room into the territory held by the incoherent rules of the adversary as domain. Every healing was a declaration. Sickness, which is a manifestation of entropy and separation, has no authority here. The coherent principle of wholeness overrules you. Every exorcism was a direct eviction. You, spirit of fragmentation and torment, are a subject of the foreign kingdom. You have no rights in this one. The feeding of the 5,000 was an economic subversion. The world as logic of scarcity is a lie. From the coherence of thanksgiving, multiplication is the natural law. He was demonstrating how a being who is fully aligned with the Father's frequency can walk into the strongholds of the opposing system sickness, scarcity, natural disorder, even death, and simply speak the higher law, causing the lower artificial law to dissolve like a shadow under direct light. But to do this consistently, he needed a discipline far beyond occasional meditation. He needed to cultivate a state of perpetual prayer, a constant, simmering coherence that could be focused in an instant into a beam of transformative authority. This is what Paul would later hint at with the mysterious command to pray without ceasing. He wasn't talking about non-stop talking. He was describing the sustained dwelling in the inner room, even while the body moves in the outer world. It is the practice of making your very breath a portal, your every step a conscious movement within the Father's secret presence. This is the warrior's practice, and it requires a map of the inner territory that is far more detailed than we have yet explored. To navigate this, you must now venture into the hidden anatomy of your own consciousness, as understood by the ancient contemplatives. They spoke of the soul not as a vague concept, but as having specific interior senses, faculties that can be trained like muscles. The mind, the will, the imagination, the memory, and the deep intuitive center they called the synderesis, the spark of the divine within. In your normal, scattered state, these faculties are like a council in chaos, each shouting its own agenda. The mind obsesses over problems. The will strains against circumstance. The imagination paints pictures of disaster. The memory replays old wounds. This is the council chamber of the ego, and its cacophony is the very door that Jesus said you must close. The practice of entering the inner room is, in technical terms, the quieting of this council and the shifting of your seat of awareness from the debating table down into the silent, observing depth of the synderesis, the spark. From that vantage point, you can hear the chaos, but you are no longer identified with it. You are the aware space in which the chaos occurs. And from this place, you can begin a process of sacred realignment. You don't suppress the mind. You gently redirect its energy from problem-solving to simple, wordless attention on the presence. You don't kill the will. You surrender its personal agenda and let it become a vessel for the will flowing from the spark. You don't stifle the imagination. You allow it to be cleansed in the silence until it can become a receiver for true symbolic visions from a deeper source, rather than a projector of fears and fantasies. This retraining is the real work of spirituality. It is how you build the mental and emotional architecture that can sustain coherence under pressure. Without it, any glimpse of the inner room will be fleeting, overwhelmed by the next wave of life chaos. But with it, you construct an inner fortress, a true tamian, from which you can observe the storms of the outer world without being swept away. And it is from this fortified silence that the most potent form of spiritual communication emerges, a communication that doesn't use words at all. This brings us to the edge of a mystery so profound that most of modern Christianity circles it without ever diving in. The realm of direct intuitive knowing, or what the classics called infused contemplation. When Jesus said, "The Son sees what the Father does," he was describing this. It is not vision with physical eyes, nor is it an intellectual deduction. It is a knowing that arises whole and complete from the place of union. It is the coherent information of the kingdom flowing into the purified faculties. You might be in the inner room, in deep stillness, and suddenly know with absolute certainty that you should call a specific person, or that a particular situation is going to resolve in a specific way, or you might receive a single luminous word that carries volumes of meaning. This is the word that proceeds from the mouth of God that Jesus said we must live by. It is manna for the moment. It is the living guidance system for the covert operative in enemy territory. This knowing is the successor to petitionary prayer. Instead of asking, "God, what should I do about this problem?" You learn to dwell in the stillness until the knowing emerges. The problem is held not in your anxious mind, but in the silent presence, and the answer is woven into a shift in your perception, a sudden clarity, or an undeniable nudge. This is how Jesus moved with such precision, knowing Zacchaeus was in the tree, knowing the Samaritan woman's history, knowing the path to the cross. It was not supernatural clairvoyance added to his humanity. It was the natural function of a humanity perfectly coherent with the Father, receiving the Father's uninterrupted flow of intuitive life. Cultivating this capacity is the next great stage after learning to close the door. It requires a daring trust, the trust to act on these subtle knowings, even when the rational mind protests. It is the practice of living by the Spirit's rhythm, not by the planner's schedule. And as you learn this, your life begins to unfold with a grace and a synchronicity that feels like you are dancing with an invisible partner, one who is leading you step by step through the chaos of the world toward purposes you may not yet fully see. But be warned, the path of intuitive knowing leads directly to the most severe and necessary crisis on the spiritual journey, a crisis so dark and disorienting that it has caused many to abandon the path, entirely believing God has forsaken them. Yet this crisis is, in fact, the final and most merciful gift. The mystics named it the dark night of the spirit. It is the logical, brutal, and glorious endpoint of everything we have discussed so far. Imagine this. After years of faithful practice, after tasting sweet moments in the inner room, after experiencing intuitive guidance and even small miracles of synchronicity, everything goes silent. Not just the silence of peace, but the silence of absence. The inner room feels empty. The presence you relied on seems to have vanished. Prayer feels like shouting into a void. The scriptures seem like dead letters. All the spiritual consolations, the feelings of connection, are stripped away. This is not a step backward. It is the necessary demolition. Up to this point, your spiritual practice, however profound, has still contained a subtle element of self. You are enjoying the experience of God. You are benefiting from the peace, the guidance, the sense of being special or chosen. The ego, in its most spiritual disguise, was still claiming the journey. The dark night is the process where God, in his infinite love, withdraws all experiential feedback to force the final surrender. He is burning away the last, most subtle attachment, your attachment to the experience of God himself. He is asking, do you love me for my gifts or for me? Do you seek the inner room for the power and peace it gives you, or do you seek it because I am there, regardless of what you feel? This is the crushing, purifying fire that creates a saint. It is the journey from praying to God to being prayer. In this night, you are called to remain in the inner room, even when it feels like a tomb of emptiness, to keep the door closed even when you are convinced nothing is on the other side. You must walk by pure, naked faith, the faith of Jesus on the cross crying, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Yet still committing his spirit. This is the ultimate coherence, a will so aligned that it holds fast to union, even when every sense and feeling screams of separation. If you persist here, in this terrible, holy darkness, something unimaginable is born. The last vestige of the separate self dies, and what emerges is no longer you praying. It is the universe praying through you. The Father's will and your will become indistinguishable not as a theory, but as the absolute, unshakable ground of your being. You have become the living prayer. And from this place, the authority you wield is no longer yours at all. It is the authority of the reality behind all reality, speaking itself into the illusion of a broken world. What happens next when a human being crosses this threshold enters the realm of pure myth and legend, but it is also the secret history of the saints, the whispers behind the greatest acts of transformation the world has ever seen. We are moving beyond methodology now and into the territory of incarnation. The line between the human and the divine intention becomes so thin it is practically transparent. This is where the stories of bilocation, of levitation, of radical sustenance without food, of incorruptible bodies after death originate. These are not superpowers tacked onto a holy person. They are the natural, if rare, side effects of a consciousness so fully coherent with the creative matrix of the universe that the local laws of physics begin to bend around it like light around a gravitational well. The person becomes a walking singularity of the kingdom. But for most, the manifestation is far quieter, yet no less world-altering. A radiance of love that disarms hatred, a peace that calms institutional frenzy, a creativity that births new solutions from a source beyond the intellect. This is the greater works Jesus promised. Not necessarily walking on water, but walking into the heart of human suffering and becoming a conduit for a love that resurrects souls. This is our destination. This is the point of the entire path. Not to become a wonder worker for the crowd, but to become a fully operational node of the Father's coherent love in a fragmented reality. Your life itself becomes the miracle. And so the journey stretches before you, from the first conscious breath of stillness to the blinding, dark glory of union. But between here and there lies a landscape of practical daily application that we have only begun to chart. How does one live in the office, in the grocery store, in the tension of family conflict, from this place of inner coherence? The answer is found in a practice so simple, so unassuming, that its power is easily overlooked. It is the practice of the secret glance. Throughout your day, in the midst of activity, you develop the habit of turning your inner attention, just for a fraction of a second, back to the silent presence within. You don't stop what you're doing. You don't close your eyes. You simply inwardly touch the still point. It's like a sonar ping sent back to home base. You are recalibrating, reminding yourself of where you truly dwell. This constant, subtle returning is what weaves the inner room into the fabric of your daily life. It transforms mundane actions into sacraments, because they are performed from within the sanctuary. Your work becomes an offering. Your conversation becomes a listening for the Father in the other. Your rest becomes a conscious sinking into the sustaining presence. This is the unceasing prayer. This is how you redeem the time, by infusing every moment with the quality of the secret place. And from this sustained orientation, your external actions begin to change organically. You find yourself speaking words of healing, not because you planned a sermon, but because they arose from the coherence in the moment. You find resources and opportunities flowing to you not through frantic networking, but through the synchronized currents of a providence you are now attuned to. You become, as Jesus said, wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove, able to navigate the systems of the world with discernment because you are not of them, and able to do so without aggression because your security is not at stake. You are a living secret, an open mystery. But to navigate this with precision, you must learn the language of the inner world itself, a language not of words, but of symbols, nudges, and the subtle movements of energy. This is the domain of dreams, of sudden hunches, of the coincidences that are too pointed to ignore. The Father speaks through the fabric of reality itself to a heart that is listening. Learning to interpret this language is the next critical skill. It requires a journal, a patient curiosity, and the suspension of the rational mind's need for immediate, linear explanation. You will begin to see patterns, to receive living parables in your daily life that offer guidance, correction, or encouragement. A broken appliance might speak to you of an area of your life where you are relying on a malfunctioning system. An unexpected encounter with a specific animal might carry a symbolic message of an attribute you need to embody. This is not pagan divination. It is the natural communication of a coherent universe with a coherent soul. It is the Spirit, as Jesus promised, guiding you into all truth, using the very stuff of creation as its vocabulary. Mastering this dialogue turns your entire life into a continuous, interactive teaching from the inner room. The world itself becomes your scripture. And as you become fluent in this dialogue, You will feel a pull, a drawing toward a specific mission or expression that is uniquely yours. This is the awakening of your spiritual name, the quality of the Father's love that seeks to incarnate through your particular life in a way it has never done before. This is not your earthly name, but your functional identity in the kingdom. It might be peacemaker, bridge, truth-teller, nurturer, fire of purification. You will discover it not by thinking, but by observing what causes your spirit to resonate with deepest joy and conviction, and what tasks, though difficult, fill you with a sense of profound rightness. This name is your assignment. It is the specific frequency of coherence you are here to broadcast into the collective field. Embracing this name is the final stage of moving from being a student of the method to becoming an expression of the method itself. Your life's purpose clarifies with a terrifying and exhilarating intensity. You are no longer aimless. You are a targeted beam of divine intention. And so, standing at this threshold, with the map in your hands, the inner senses awakening, and the hint of a name whispering in your spirit, you are faced with the ultimate choice. The adventure that awaits is vaster and stranger than any fiction. It is a journey into the heart of reality itself. The next stage of our exploration will delve into the forbiddance. Apocalyptic texts, the book of Revelation, not as a future forecast of violence, but as a symbolic guidebook for the final stages of inner alchemy, where the cosmos within you is remade. We will decode the beasts, the seals, the number, and the New Jerusalem as archetypal processes of consciousness transformation. What you will discover will make the wilderness temptation look like a child's primer. The path ahead is one of unimaginable beauty and necessary terror. For to be reborn as a coherent being in a fragmented world is to become a catalyst for upheaval and resurrection. The storm is gathering. The old world, the system built on handed-over authority, is shuddering. And your silent, steadfast coherence in the inner room is not an escape from the storm. It is the eye of the storm. It is the still point from which a new world is being birthed. The call is no longer to just listen. The call is to become the sound. Look at how far we've come. Look at the ground we've covered, from the echo of unanswered prayers to the silent, thunderous truth of the inner room. We began at a tomb with a prayer that defied time, a thanksgiving spoken in the past tense for a miracle not yet seen. And we asked the dangerous, liberating question, what did Jesus know in that moment that we have forgotten? We traced the pattern: withdrawal, solitude, the interior shift, then power, and we found it was not a mystery, but a method. A method hidden in plain sight in a single mistranslated Greek word, tamion. Not a closet, but an inner chamber, a treasury, the most secret place within you. We learned that prayer is not about convincing a distant God, but about achieving coherence, a laser-like alignment where your will and the Father's will are no longer two things, but one single, unstoppable flow. We faced the stark truth of why this was lost, not through malice, but through the slow erosion of the subtle by the systematic, leaving us with rituals, but robbed of the encounter. We journeyed into the wilderness, not to see a moral lesson, but to witness a cosmic battle, a systematic dismantling of the entire artificial reality of lack, spectacle, and worldly authority. We saw that every miracle of Jesus was an act of holy insurgency, a declaration of the kingdom's higher law imposed upon the crumbling rules of a managed world. We mapped the inner anatomy of your own consciousness, the chaotic council of mind, will, and imagination, and learned how to quiet it, to step back into the observing depth, the spark of the divine within. We named the successor to begging prayer, direct intuitive knowing, the manna of the moment that flows when you dwell in the stillness. And we dared to stare into the necessary abyss, the dark night of the spirit, where God in fierce love strips away the final attachment, your attachment to the experience of Him, forging a faith so pure it can hold fast in total darkness. We arrived at the destination, a life lived not as a petitioner, but as a prayer, A life where your secret glance throughout the day weaves the sanctuary into the mundane, where you learn the symbolic language of a speaking creation, and where you begin to hear the whisper of your spiritual name, your unique assignment as a frequency of the Father's love in this world. You are no longer a visitor to the inner room. You are called to become its guardian, its living expression. This is not theoretical. This is your inheritance. This is the lost method restored. But knowledge without action is a seed on stone. The Spirit has stirred this in you for a reason. This cannot end here, with you simply informed. It must continue with you activated. So now, I am calling you to stand up in your newfound coherence. This is your moment of holy responsibility. The algorithm of this platform is not your master. It is a field, and you are a sower. What is planted here can spread to corners of the world we cannot imagine, to souls aching in silence for the very key you now hold. Here is what I need you to do, right now. First, make your declaration public. The enemy of coherence thrives in isolation. Break its power. Scroll down to the comments. This is not just a comment section. This is an altar. This is a wall of testimony. I want you to leave one of three things. 1. Your personal confession. Right, I am stepping into the inner room. I am closing the door to the noise. I choose coherence over chaos. Name it. Claim it. 2. A short prayer of thanksgiving from the inner room. Not a request. A past tense declaration of gratitude for what God has already done, is already doing. Let it be your Lazarus prayer. 3. Your testimony. What has shifted for you, even in this watching? What old idea of prayer shattered? What new hope ignited? Speak it. God showed me. I finally understood. 2nd, become a carrier. You are now a steward of this lost method. Do not hoard this manna. Share this video, not just once, not just with one person. I am challenging you, with all the urgency this message carries, to share this with at least 10 people. Send it to the friend whose prayers feel empty. Send it to the family member who is weary of religion. Post it where seekers gather. When you click share, you are not pushing content. You are extending a lifeline. You are throwing open the door to the inner room for someone drowning in noise. You are an agent of the kingdom, disrupting the managed system with a viral truth. Imagine if every person here shared this with 10, and those 10 shared. We are not just growing a channel. We are igniting a global reclamation of true prayer. We are building a digital monastery of practitioners, a network of coherent souls who will shift the frequency of this world. The time for passive listening is over. The call is not to admire the map. The call is to walk the path and to light torches for those behind you. This video reaching more souls is not about numbers. It is about liberation. It is about the deaf hearing the still, small voice for the first time. It is about the sick discovering the healer within. It is about the weary finding the rest that has eluded them their entire lives. You are the conduit for that. Your click, your share, your comment of testimony, these are not mundane actions. They are sacraments of distribution. They are how the body of Christ coordinates in this age. Do not let this fire die in your inbox. Do not let this revelation become another piece of forgotten content. The momentum is now. The responsibility is yours. Go now to the comments. Bear witness. Then to your messages, your groups, your communities. Spread the word. Be the one who cared enough to pass the key. The final part of this story is not mine to write. It is yours to live. And it begins the moment you decide that this truth is too important to keep to yourself. I will be in the comments, reading every declaration, every prayer, every testimony. I stand with you. Now go. The world is waiting for the coherent ones. Let it begin with you.